In 1920, a delegation of socialists, which included Karl Kautsky, Emil van der Bellen, Ramsay MacDonald, and Camilla Huisman, was sent by the International Socialist Commission to a country that had recently come under the control of Marxists. Ethel Snowden, a member of the delegation, stated that they have set up what is most perfect socialism in Europe. This country was not Russia under Lenin and the Bolsheviks, but the Democratic Republic of Georgia. The lands of the Russian Empire fell into bitter warfare after the fall of the empire in 1917. The failure of the Republic under the leadership of Alexander Kerensky, as every ideology from anarchism to monarchism tried to stake out a claim to the new order. In this new world, on the fringes of the former empire, was the new state of Georgia. This country, one of dozens of groups fighting in the Russian Civil War, is often forgotten today, with there being no major coverage anywhere on YouTube and fewer English language sources on the topic. But history of this country is as interesting as any other state. The effects of these events still have long-lasting geopolitical ramifications, with conflicts between Russia and Georgia in 2008 and the Azerbaijani-Armenian conflicts, and Russia meddling in another nearby region. Noah Jordania was born in Lanchkuti in 1868 and attempted to become a priest by attending the Tbilisi Spiritual Seminary. He started to read the illegal publications and came to support the Narodniks, who were the forerunners of the socialist movement in Russia. Jordania left Georgia and went to Poland to study veterinary science. During his time in Poland, he started reading the works of Kautsky. His beliefs shifted from revolutionary to transitional.
Democracy must be established first, and only afterwards, by the furtherance of economic progress and by extensive organizational work, can we proceed towards social revolutions.
He also opposed Georgian separatism and that Georgia, Poland, and Russia had to work together. This belief was also shared by Rosa Luxemburg, although the majority of socialists in the country supported Polish nationalism. He returned to Georgia in 1892 and helped found the Masadazi, which was the first legal Marxist organization in Georgia. However, he had to flee the country in 1893 after being warned that he would be arrested. He traveled Europe for 4 years, which took him to Switzerland, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. He met Georgy Plekhanov, one of the first Russians to call himself a Marxist, Paul Lafarge, Karl Marx's son-in-law, and Kautsky. Jordania returned to Georgia in 1897 and became a leader in the Social Democratic Party. The party had been formed from the Masadazi. He would enact what he learned in Europe. The party would focus on vanguardist intellectia, as the peasants could not lead. However, this belief would be shattered in only a few years by events in the area. The Paris Commune's 10-week struggle in one of the most famous left-wing uprisings and is commonly remembered as the first communist uprising, but ideologically the communards was a wide diversity of socialist democracy to anarchism. The first true communist uprising would come in southern Georgia's area of Gurdia, a poor region on the fringes of the Russian Empire. In May 1902, a dispute began in Nicoiti over grazing rights, with many of the farmers complaining about the small allotments of land given to them. Gurdians went to find work within the cities, where they became active in the labor organizations and the Social Democratic Party. When these people returned to Gurdia, they had mass meetings in Nicoiti that was attended by over 700 people. They created a list of demands that included the reduction of rent, free grazing rights, and the ending of payments to local priests. Despite their support of ending payments to local priests, they were not anti-religious, and the priests even led one of their meetings. People in Gurdia would continue to pray for the imperial family until after Bloody Sunday's massacre in 1905. The activities in Gurdia were mainly ignored by the social democratic leaders in Georgia. Carlo Ghicazi stated that we cannot have a peasant movement under our banners. However, Jordania, who had been born in Gurdia, supported the movement, as he believed that there was no difference between peasants and other workers. His support for the Gurdians would lead to a massive shift in left-wing politics away from vanguardism towards mass movement politics. Maksud Alkanov was ordered by Viceroy Yoko Malama to lead a military invasion against Guria in 1905, but the plan was halted when Malama was replaced by this guy on the screen, who chose to conduct a fact-finding mission. Sultan Karim Gari was selected to report on the Gurian Republic. However, his mission was considered a failure as journalists who came with him had freely reported on the area. 1,000 people attended a meeting with Karim Gari and presented a list of 15 demands which included formation of a constitutional assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of education, separation of church and state, and the abolition of the army. Karim Gari suggested that concessions should be made towards Gurians. Revolution was occurring throughout western Georgia, and in Nazgorod, a platoon of Cossacks fought 4,000 peasants for 2 days. The viceroy ordered Alkikhanov to crush the rebellion, but Vladimir Streltsky, the governor of Kutai's governorate, opposed the decision and the troops were withdrawn. However, Streltsky would be later removed from his position in January of 1906. Alkanov was finally allowed to invade Guria in 1906, and he issued a 17-point declaration. He went to Guria with almost 20 battalions, 26 cannons, and a squadron of Cossacks. The Gurian Republic was defeated by March 1906, and 300 rebel leaders were deported to Siberia. Although Vladimir Lenin would not mention the Gurian Republic in his writings, Leo Tolstoy would. Tolstoy stated that what is happening in Guria is an event of immense importance. The Russian Duma was established by Tsar Nicholas II following the revolutions, and Jordania, Iraq, Streltsy, Noah Ramshvili, and other Mensheviks won seats in Georgia. Jordania served as the Social Democratic leader in the First Duma before being replaced by Streltsy in the Second Duma. However, the Tsar ordered the arrest and deportation to Siberia of socialist members of the Duma in a coup in 1907. The Tsar would later be overthrown 10 years later by the February Revolution. In the 1917 election, the Mensheviks received 662,000 votes in the Transcaucasian region compared to 86,000 for the Bolsheviks. But on the national level, the Mensheviks only received 3% of the vote compared to the Bolsheviks' 22%. From the 19th to the 22nd of November 1917, a convention attended by all the political parties of Georgia, with the exclusion of the Bolsheviks who boycotted, was held and chaired by Jordania. The Transcaucasian Commissariat was formed on November 15, 1918, following the October Revolution and the dissolution of the Russian Constituent Assembly. The Transcaucasian Democratic Federative Republic was created on April 22nd, following a Sejm secession that included former members of the Russian Constituent Assembly, the Chekhyze, who had been the leader of the Mensheviks, the Social Democratic faction in the assembly, was elected as the Sejm's chair. However, the TDFR only existed until May 22nd. Until May 26th, when the declaration was annulled following internal problems due to the Georgian, Armenian, and Azerbaijani populations and external problems from the Ottomans. The death of the TDFR came with the creation of the Azerbaijani Democratic Republic, the First Republic of Armenia, and the Democratic Republic of Georgia. The National Council of Georgia held a special session in the former Viceroy's residence in Tbilisi. The 120-member council was made up of Georgians, Russians, Armenians, Zirids, Abkhazians, Ossetians, and Jews. 48 members of the council and 36 candidates attended the session, which was presided over by Jordania. Their declaration of independence was approved at the meeting. The country's first government was organized with membership from multiple political parties. The Social Democrats held 4 positions: Ramshvili as Prime Minister, Gregor Gigaze as Minister of Defense, Akaki Tshisekedi as Minister of Foreign Affairs, Noe Kamakiki as Minister of Agriculture. The Social Federalists held 2 positions with Georgi Lakashvili as Minister of Education and Shalva Mekashvili as the Minister of Justice. The National Democrats held 1 position with Georgi Cerulli as Minister of Finance, Trade, and Industry. The Social Revolutionaries also held 1 position with this guy on screen right now, as Minister of Roads. However, Ramishvili only served as Prime Minister for 1 month and was replaced by Jordania in June of 1918. The country's first election, which was done with direct vote and universal suffrage, was held from the 14th to the 16th of February 1919. The Social Democratic Party of Georgia won 109 out of the 130 seats in the Constituent Assembly. 5 women were elected to the legislature, all of them being of the Social Democrats. 15 parties participated in the election, while the Bolsheviks boycotted it. But the turnout was still over 60% of eligible voters. The parliament first convened on March 12, 1919, with Chikeze as the first speaker. A temporary currency was installed in July of 1919, and the State Bank of the Democratic Republic of Georgia was formed in December. The country suffered from insurgency by the Bolsheviks. An insurgency in Abkhazia by the Bolsheviks, who were attempting to incorporate it into Russia, had to be suppressed by General Georgy Mazhvili leading 300 cavalry. There were 3 unsuccessful insurgencies by the Bolsheviks in Orsenia attempting to incorporate the area into Russia, and the Kars Republic, led by Ibrahim Bey, was formed and with support of the British in January of 1919, and an uprising was led by Serif Beg, which took Abkhazia on February 11th. The Georgians were able to retake the city from the Kars Republic, and the republic was later dissolved by the British in April of 1919, with its leadership being arrested and sent to Malta. The Azerbaijani, Armenian, Russian, Greek, German, Abkhaz, and Ossetian minorities in the country had representation in the National Council. A self-determination movement by the Ossetians had existed in the Russian Empire. Nicholas Jolevi, who served as a representative of the Ossetians outside of the Caucasus, sent a letter to the head of the Special Committee of the South Caucasus in 1917, asking for a separate administrative province within the empire. He criticized the current system in which, according to him, the Georgians were the landlords while the Ossetians were peasants. The Second Congress of South Ossetia was held from the 15th to the 17th of December 1917, where the National Council of South Ossetia, which would be dominated by Bolsheviks, was formed, and the delegates gave support for more self-governance. This council sent a letter to the National Council of Georgia on January 4th, 1918, stating that they were the highest representatives of the region and that cases regarding the Ossetian nation were directed to them. The Ossetians put forward a project which required the creation of a new separate region for South Ossetia, and that the creation of a new provincial administration with Tversk as its center. The Ossetian Council's first meeting was held in March of 1918 while Turkey was invading Georgia. In 1918, peasant uprisings occurred, and some of their demands included the division of lands, the expulsion of people working in revolutionary organs in the Georgi province, the expulsion of all noblemen in the Georgi province, and freedom of speech and assembly. The workers and peasant committees of Tversk was only given 3 hours to fulfill these demands, and when delegates attempted to negotiate, they were shot at by the rebels. The Georgian army put down the rioting in Tversk on March 22nd, but the rebels continued their activities in the region. Georgia's parliament was divided on the issue of the Orsinians. The position of the National Democrats was summarized as:
in Georgia, there are only Ossetians and not the Ossetia. In Georgia, we can speak about Ossetians and not the Ossetia.
Minister of Internal Affairs Ramishvili stated that pacification was needed for reconciliation of the national elements. Alexander Lamashide, a social democrat, stated that
if we satisfy Ossetians, like Georgian peasants, we may find them as more diligent citizens. Our politics towards ethnic Ossetians should be exactly the same as towards ethnic Georgians. By this policy, we'll be able to handle the order. No, we can't choose another way. In the state, all citizens should feel themselves as children. No one should feel itself as a stepchild. Democracy must be established first, and only afterwards, by the furtherance of economic progress and by extensive organizational work, can we proceed towards social revolutions.
A second National Council of Southern Orsenia was formed in December of 1918 and acted as an independent government. They passed a law entitled the Temporary Emergency Court in 1919, but it was not approved by the Georgian Minister of Justice. The Orsinian Council boycotted the 1919 election due to this. Although Orsinia in Gorgi opposed the Georgian Republic, the Orsinians in Tbilisi believed that democracy in Orsinia could only be attained through cooperation with the Georgians. The Georgians claimed that the Orsinians were attempting to reunite with Russia and that the Orsinian Council left their headquarters and moved to the mountains in May of 1919. The Orsinian Council created and set a constitution for southern Orsinia, which would create an independent country. The Georgians offered instead to create the Zhava province within Georgia, where the Orsinian language would be used within, but all communications with the national government would be in Georgian. This plan was rejected. Another rebellion started in 1920, where the Orsinians received support from the Red Army in northern Orsinia. However, a peace treaty was signed between Georgia and Russia during this, leading to the Orsinians losing their support from the Red Army. Vlosko Joheli led the Georgian People's Guard and defeated the rebellion. Georgia was recognized by Argentina, Austria, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, France, Germany, Haiti, Italy, Japan, Luxembourg, Mexico, Poland, Romania, Turkey, the United Kingdom, and other countries. It received recognition from the League of Nations in January of 1921. First, we will look at the relations Georgia shared with its neighbors, with the exclusion of Russia, which will be covered later, and then its relations with the international community as a whole. Despite Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia having broken away from each other in 1918, they still initially coordinated their defense. Georgia and Azerbaijan made a 3-year agreement for mutual defense in 1919, and a section of the agreement allowed for the inclusion of Armenia, but they never joined. Azerbaijan later fell after an invasion by the Red Army in 1920, and was turned into the Azerbaijani Soviet Socialist Republic. The former leader of Azerbaijan was given refuge in Tbilisi. Russia and Azerbaijan launched an invasion into Georgia in May of 1920, but were defeated, and a peace treaty was made on June 12, 1920, in Ashgabat between Azerbaijan and Georgia. Georgia proposed a regional conference in 1918 and invited Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the mountainous Republic of Northern Caucasus. This conference was to address the recognition of each other's independence, a solution to disputes, and not entering agreements that were detrimental to each other, and support at the Paris Peace Conference. However, the Armenians did not attend the conference. While Georgia and Azerbaijan had worked together during their short existence, the same wasn't true for Armenia. War broke out between the two after Armenia invaded on December 9, 1918, and mobilization orders were given by Georgia on December 18th. The war ended with a ceasefire on December 31st, following an international mediation. A conference was held between the two countries in Tbilisi from the 9th to the 17th of January 1919, which resulted in the disputed territory being declared a neutral zone of Lorel. A later agreement on November 3rd created an arbitration system and a plan for free travel between the countries for 3 years. On June 4, 1918, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship was signed between Georgia and the Ottoman Empire in Batumi. This treaty set the borders to those before the Treaty of Adrianople made in 1829. Another treaty required Georgia to demobilize its navy, turn over all railway transportation to the Turkish army, and other conditions that did not favor Georgia. The Georgia National Council protested this treaty, and with the help of Germany, a new conference was called to revise the treaty. However, the end of World War I and the defeat of the Ottoman Empire prevented this. This treaty was never enforced, but the Ottomans did recognize Georgia as a country, and diplomatic relations and missions were established between the two. The last Ottoman forces left the country following their withdrawal from Semes Joheti on the 30th of October 1918. However, the situation between Georgia and Turkey reversed following Mustafa Kemal, now known as the Ataturk, rise to leadership. He had positive relations with the Russians and attacked Armenia in 1920. Turkey offered to help Georgia militarily after the Red Army took Tbilisi in 1921, but demanded that the Adhem and Ardavan districts be given to them. Turkish forces entered the Batumi region on March 11th, but did not assist the Georgians and instead occupied the region and appointed Kazem Bey as its governor. Russia and Turkey made an agreement of brotherhood and friendship the day before Georgian leadership fled the country. What was the first country that Georgia established diplomatic relationships with? Was it one of its neighbors like Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, or Russia? Was it one of the great powers in the region like France and the United Kingdom? No. It was actually the German Empire. The Germans were seen as the only viable protectors of the country against both Russia and Turkey. The Germans were interested in the region for its resources, which included oil and steel. Erich Ludendorff supported occupying Georgia for its resources and believed that the Germans could not trust the Turks. The first document between the Georgians and Germans was recognizing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. An agreement was signed between Germans and Georgians on the 28th of May 1918 in Poti over military and financial issues. Germany later sent 2 Bavarian battalions for the German Caucasus expedition, and a diplomatic mission was established between General Friedrich Ferdinand von Kressenstein. German soldiers aided the Georgians when the Turks invaded in June of 1918. The Germans also mediated negotiations between the Turks and Georgians, which produced a peace treaty that allowed Turkey to determine the size of the Georgian army, the ability of Turkey to deploy soldiers within Georgia, and the disarmament of Russian ships within the Georgian waters. The Germans also had free use of the railroads until the end of the war. A joint mining company was established to extract resources, and the German mark was a legal tender in Georgia, although these acts would not be placed into effect due to the Germans' defeat in World War I. A diplomatic mission led by Foreign Affairs Minister Ceckinkelly to Berlin got German recognition of Georgia with the support of the Reichstag. Count Friedrich Markgraf von der Strengenberg was later appointed to serve as the head of the German diplomatic representation in Georgia. However, Germany's involvement in the country mainly ended following the end of World War I and the start of the 1918 to 1919 revolution. The German soldiers stationed in Georgia were withdrawn. Georgians awarded the Order of Queen Tamara upon many of the Germans. The United Kingdom's involvement in Georgia and the Caucasus regions was based on its use in aiding the white movement during the Russian Civil War against the Bolsheviks. Oliver Wardrobe was sent as British diplomatic representative to Georgia. As Britain's involvement in the Russian Civil War ended, so too did its interest in Georgia. The decision to withdraw forces from the country was decided on April of 1919 and was carried out in August. Britain's last major act in the country was its involvement in the Kyrgyz Republic, and it withdrew from Batumi in July of 1920. Although the British did recognize Georgian independence, they had voted against Georgia's admission to the League of Nations in December of 1920. The Georgians sent a delegation under the leadership of Chikadze to the Paris Peace Conference held from January of 1919 to December of 1920, whose purpose was to establish a new world order following the end of World War I. The delegation presented a memorandum on the 14th of March 1919 stating the necessity of the country's independence and gave the conference a map of the country in French. Jordania had told Chikadze that if he failed to obtain recognition at the conference, that he should attempt to gain protection from either the United Kingdom or France with the condition that they would not interfere with Georgia's internal affairs. The British had already withdrawn their forces, but Prime Minister David Lloyd George offered to give a mandate to the Italians. The Italians prepared for an expedition to Georgia, but this fell through due to the Liberal Union losing in 1919 general election to a coalition under the leadership of Francisco Severri Nette and the Italian Radical Party. After gaining de facto recognition from the Paris Peace Conference, Jordania stated,
"From now on, the Georgian nation is accepted by the great nations as equal among equals."
President Woodrow Wilson was interested in the Caucasus and considered creating a mandate in Armenia. The Georgians opposed a mandate for their country, but supported one in Armenia. Wilson's plan never materialized due to being rejected by the United States Senate. The United States later came to oppose Georgia, with Secretary of State Bainbridge Colby stating that the United States does not approve the decision of the Supreme Council of Paris on the recognition of so-called republics of Georgia and Azerbaijan. Georgia was not allowed full membership into the League of Nations, as it only had 10 supporters out of the 42 member states. Now it's time to discuss Georgia's relationship with Russia. White Russia. Anton Denikin, the commander-in-chief of the White Russian forces in southern Russia, defeated the Bolsheviks in Abkhazia in 1918. The Georgians occupied Tobolsk and Sochi following this in July. Denikin demanded that Gagari district in Abkhazia be handed over to the White Russians and invaded in February of 1919 in an attempt to seize them. The Western Allies created a demarcation line between the two, and the White Russian Guard was unable to conquer the Caucasus region. The White Guard recognized the de facto independence of the the republics in the Caucasus on February 11, 1920. The Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks had a sour relationship since their founding dispute in 1903 between Julius Martov and Vladimir Lenin over the organization of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party at the party's Second Congress. The Mensheviks had also left Russia following the dissolution of the Russian Constituent Assembly by the Bolsheviks. The Georgians initially attempted to improve relations with Russia, with them sending G. Gadadze to serve as ambassador. He was arrested and imprisoned. Lenin proposed a military union with the Georgians against the White Russians in 1920, but was rejected by Jordania as the Georgians had adopted a principle of neutrality. The 11th Army of the Red Army defeated Azerbaijan in April 1920, and Sergei Orgetzi wanted to invade Georgia, but an attack from Poland under the leadership of Joseph Pilsudski and a demand from Great Britain ordering Russia to end all military operations in Crimea and the Caucasus prevented him. A coup attempted in Tbilisi was launched by the Bolsheviks from the 2nd to the 3rd of May 1920, with the belief that the 11th Army would aid them. The coup failed without the support of the army. A peace treaty between the two countries was made on May 7, 1920, and signed by Georgian Assembly member Grigol Rautzy and assigned Commissar of Russia's Commissariat of Foreign Affairs Levin Karhan. The treaty had Russia recognize Georgian independence, promise not to interfere in internal affairs, and renounce claims to the territory. Sergei Kirikov was elected to serve as Russia's ambassador to Georgia, and he was later replaced by Aaron Shiman, while Georgia sent G. Merkos as member of the Assembly. The peace did not even last a year before Russia invaded in February of 1921. Georgia's leadership fled on the 16th of March, and the last meeting of the Constituent Assembly was held on the 17th. The Red Army took Batumi on the 18th, completing their occupation. The leadership of the country fled following the annexation. A guerrilla resistance to the occupation lasted from 1921 to 1924 under the leadership of these men. The major August uprising happened in 1924. But the Soviets successfully suppressed the insurrection and ended the resistance against the Soviet occupation in Georgia. Jordania died in Paris in 1953, but his son, Regé Jordania, would return to Georgia in 1990. Dmitry Amekvali, who had fought as vice colonel, later became a member of the French Foreign Legion and famous member of the French resistance during World War II. In 2021, Amekvali was posthumously awarded the Order of National Heroes at a ceremony in honor of the 100th years anniversary of French recognition of the Democratic Republic of Georgia. The Act of Georgian Independence, which had been created on the 26th of May 1918, had served the function of constitution, but at only 7 paragraphs long, had to be replaced. Following the 1919 election, a 15-member constitutional commission was established by the Constituent Assembly. The Social Democrats held 9 seats, the National Democrats held 2 seats, the Social Federalists held 2 seats, and the Social Revolutionaries, Nationalists, and Dashniks all held 1 seat each. The constitution developed by the commission was inspired by constitutions of the United States, Belgium, Switzerland, France, Germany, and Czechoslovakia. The draft version was published for review in July of 1920, and the ratification procedure was started by the parliament in November. The constitution of the country was adopted during the Soviet invasion on the 21st of February 1921, and only 4 days before the annexation. The official text of the constitution was first published in the town of Batumi, where the government had fled following the Soviet occupation of Tbilisi. Despite its short existence, the constitution was later praised for its content that was considered ahead of its time. Hans Dietrich Genscher stated that the constitution had
already advocated such values as liberty, democracy, and rule of law, which the modern Europe is based on currently.
Ramsay MacDonald stated on the Constitution that
I familiarized myself with its constitution, its social and economic reconstruction, and what I saw there, I wish I could see in my country too.
The Constitution consisted of 17 chapters and 149 articles. Many parts of the Constitution were advanced for the time and are still advanced to this day. The head of government was only allowed to discharge the armed forces for 21 days at most before requiring parliamentary permission. The death penalty, which had only been abolished in 7 countries, had been banned. Trials were required to happen within 24 hours, one extension of 24 hours allowed following an arrest. It had separation of church and state, with funding to churches from the budget not being allowed. Freedom of speech, assembly, petition, strike, and the organization of trade unions were protected. Article 45 of the Constitution stated that guarantees established in the Constitution do not deny other guarantees and rights which are not established here, but take for granted due to the principles recognized in the Constitution, which was inspired by the 10th Amendment in the United States Constitution. The Constitution also guaranteed free primary education, restriction of working to 48 hours per week, protection of labor rights for women and children, and made employer violations of labor codes punishable by criminal law. The governmental system laid out by the Constitution was a mesh of Swiss direct democracy and representational parliamentary system. The parliament was elected through the use of universal, direct, secret, and proportional votes every 3 years. Let us just compare that to other nations at the time. The United States would not switch to secret ballots completely until 1950. New Zealand would not grant secret ballots to majority until 1937. Women were not given the right to vote in the United Kingdom until 1928. Spain 1931. France 1945. Belgium 1948, and Switzerland until 1990. The executive was based on the Swiss system as a panel accountable to the parliament. There had been a proposal to include a president in the government, but it had been overwhelmingly rejected, as it was stated by the members of the commission that the president of the United States held more power than the King of England. Unilateral rule was also opposed due to the recent history of Tsarist Russia. However, Gregor Lokobansky, who was later killed during the Great Purge, supported a presidential stating,
"If there is a place, anywhere, where a president with sufficient authority is needed, then this place is Georgia, which today is struggling for reunification."
The representative of the Republic was the chair, akin to the Prime Minister, who would be limited to 2 terms, although the initial draft had limited them to a single term. The Democratic Republic of Georgia was a unitary state, although there were multiple autonomous regions. Sochem, Akaze, Butumi region, Ajara, and Zakatoli were given autonomy. This autonomy included control of the local finance, public education, community and town governance, court, public health, and infrastructure. The Senate was the supreme court in the country, which served as the court of cassation, and was appointed by the parliament. Although constitutional review was not formally in the Constitution, other parts of the text stated that the legislation could not contradict the Constitution. Gregory Gozazi, one of the members of the Constitutional Committee, also stated that there is only one case when a citizen has a right not to abide a law. Such a case is called disputing constitutionality of a law. A citizen has the right to lodge a claim with a court on the constitutionality of a law which restricts his liberties and threatens him with such restriction. The court is obligated to review this case, and if it deems that the plaintiff's claim is well grounded, it can reject the law and not guide itself by it in deciding the case. Gazzava also referenced constitutional review in the United States, which he stated that the court is obligated to defend the Constitution as the main law and reject all new laws which contradict it. Such right of review is enjoyed by the courts in the United States.
King.